Hello and welcome to Uzreport World News, and my name is Bahram Ghafanov. The Uzbek government is planning to direct $190 million of credit resources through the People's Bank to attract women to entrepreneurship. This was announced at the video conference chaired by Shavkat Mirziyoyev on Friday.
In his recent message to the Oliy Majlis, President Mirziyoyev proposed to create a Republican Public Women's Council. The formation of this council has been completed and should carry out systematic work to increase the social and political activity of women, support their entrepreneurship, education, and professional development, assist them in finding a decent job, protecting their health, and solving housing issues. Some $7 million is to be allocated from the Employment Fund to provide entrepreneurs with a preferential lease for up to 30 years. A system of incentives will be introduced for women who want to get higher education but are brought up without one of their parents, as well as single women who have lost their breadwinner. The amount of the contract for studying at the university will be paid by the administration and the university, ordered the president. He also instructed to take under special control the health of 44,000 women in need of medical care. The goal is to carry out in-depth medical screening by the end of the year, including cancer screening of nearly 9 million women. In order to prevent oncological diseases, 323,000 girls will be vaccinated against the human papillomavirus. The fund for the support of women will annually allocate $3 to $5 million for the treatment of women in need. Each region will be allocated over $900,000 to provide housing for women living in non-residential premises, and $500,000 to provide housing for girls growing up without fathers.
Uzbekistan's external debt as of January 1st this year reached $21.1 billion, which is equivalent to 36.5% of GDP, according to the data provided by the country's finance ministry.
The debt raised on behalf of the government amounted to $15.1 billion. $6 billion was raised under the state guarantee. Funds were mainly channeled towards infrastructure development as well as agricultural and industrial projects. In particular, $2.6 billion was spent on projects in the energy sector. The financial regulator notes that most of the loans were received on preferential terms. The Asian Development Bank provided the lion's share of loans at $5 billion. The World Bank allocated $3.7 billion. The Chinese Exim Bank $2 billion. Some $1.7 billion were raised from international investors. The share of the Islamic Development Bank made up $0.9 billion. On November 19 last year, the regulator placed dual tranche sovereign international bonds denominated both in dollars and local currency in the amount of $750 million on the London Stock Exchange. The income that will be generated from the placement is expected to be used for the implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including the construction of new schools, the construction and reconstruction of new health facilities, water supply projects, etc. The ministry also said that the country's domestic debt at the beginning of the year reached $2.2 billion or 3.9% of GDP. It added that despite the dynamics of the growth of external debt, this indicator remains moderate in relation to GDP. In accordance with the legislation, the volume of external debt in the current year should not exceed 60% of GDP.
The state-owned Uzbek company UzAsset announced on February 25 the start of selection process for consultants sought for the privatization of state-owned shares in more than a dozen companies in various sectors of the economy. According to UzAsset, established last year under the State Asset Management Agency to speed up the privatization process, the list of companies includes the country's second-largest Fergana oil refinery, several chemical companies, and wine and vodka factories. Bidders must submit their bids no later than 6 o'clock Tashkent time on March 3, 2021, the report says. Last year, Uzbekistan announced its massive privatization program, involving the full or partial privatization of more than 620 state-owned companies and properties to accelerate the Central Asian country's transition to a market economy. Earlier this month, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev inked a decree providing for the acceleration of the privatization process. Fitch Ratings maintained Uzbekistan's long-term foreign currency issue default rating at BB-, with a stable outlook throughout 2020. According to the agency, Uzbekistan has demonstrated resilience to the coronavirus pandemic, supported by its robust external and fiscal buffers, access to external financing and diversified economy. It was among few sovereigns to avoid an economic contraction in 2020, as timely support from official creditors underpinned anti-crisis measures. High gold prices benefited export, public finances and international reserves. Fitch estimates government debt low relatively to peers, but the pace of borrowing has been rapid in recent years, and it's almost entirely foreign currency denominated. Mitigating factors include the maturity and cost structure of government debt and the government's high cash buffers. The U.S. non-governmental organization American Councils is intending to send about 1,000 English teachers to Uzbekistan, as well as increase grants for educational projects.
The first group of 27 linguistic specialists has already arrived in Uzbekistan, who are teaching in all regions of the country, covering both secondary schools and universities. In addition, more than 10 educational programs funded by the U.S. government are currently underway in Uzbekistan. All these projects will serve to improve the skills and knowledge of domestic specialists and youth. American Councils specializes in promoting international education programs by enhancing cultural exchange, language training, and professional development. The organization implements projects in 90 countries of the world. This non-governmental organization resumed its work in Uzbekistan in 2018 and is currently participating in the implementation of a grant agreement on the development of education in our country for a total of $50 million.
The international investment company Freedom Finance has successfully completed the deal, this time on bonds of development company First Development Group. On this occasion, a press conference was held in Tashkent for journalists as well as for investors and colleagues in an online format. The completion of transaction was marked by the opening of accounts by 156 individuals and 9 legal entities. New investors were up to become owners of bonds for almost 5 billion sums. The rest of the volume was bought out by existing clients. We gathered people in the offices and told them what the stock market is and why they need to invest, as well as how they can save and increase money. Of course, the client base that we now have in Uzbekistan contains more than 7,000 retail investors. This is our loyal client base that also took part in this placement. They are more willing to buy this particular instrument because for them it's a kind of diversification of investment portfolio. This is due to the fact that when there are only shares, there is a risk that the price of these shares will change. In contrast, bonds are fixed income. We also took risks and worried. Nevertheless, we were confident that our company would sell its shares. The conditions were such that in case of slowdown in sales or disinterest, Freedom Finance buys out half of our shares. But as you can see, our shares were sold in 15 days. Uzbekistan is planning to use the latest technology for water purification, particularly in the disinfection of water from various viruses and bacteria in the condition of Uzbekistan with the help of ultraviolet rays. The agreement was reached at a discussion of chairman of the management board of Ussu Tamirnod with representatives of NGO LIT in Tashkent. Ultraviolet disinfection is a physical method based on the effect of rays on the structure of the DNA and RNA of viruses, bacteria, and protozoa. Uzbekistan has never used this kind of technology in the treatment of water. Expert of the Brussels Analytical Centre, South Asia Democratic Forum, Siegfried Wohl shared his views on the role of railway route Mazar-e-Sharif, Kabul, Peshawar in the economy of Uzbekistan as a meeting with Ambassador of Uzbekistan to the Benelux countries, Dilyor Hakimov.
Honored to share some of my views on Uzbekistan.
I believe that the new project for the construction of a railway on the route Mazar-e-Sharif, Kabul, Peshawar, it will open up huge opportunities not only for Uzbekistan, Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also promote the development of direct contacts between people as well as the establishment of trade. Thus, Uzbekistan will be connected to the main hub in Afghanistan, the city of Mazar-e-Sharif.
In turn, through Pakistani city of Peshawar, Uzbekistan will be able to connect to other trade corridors.
We will be true partners to help you recover and rebuild from the storms and this pandemic and the economic crisis. We're in for the long haul.
President Joe Biden and the First Lady were in Houston, Texas Friday, days after the president issued a major disaster declaration to free up funds for the state as it grapples with the damage left by a powerful winter storm. Biden met with Republican Governor Greg Abbott, spoke with volunteers at a Houston food bank, and workers at the Harris County Emergency Operations Center in Houston.
You're saving people's lives, and you're doing, as my mother would say, sure, you're doing God's work, kid.
Biden's Friday visit comes as Texas works to recover from a severe February storm that killed at least 24 people, caused serious damage to homes and businesses, and left millions without power or clean water for days. The president was told that scores of people still don't have clean water.
We still have multiple water utility districts that are still repairing their systems today, and 57,000 residents still have to boil their water.
Last week, Abbott asked FEMA and Biden to issue a major disaster declaration for all of the state's 254 counties. Biden initially signed off on a declaration for 77 counties, which Abbott said was not enough. Biden added 31 more on Monday and signaled he was open to increasing the number.
When a crisis hits our states, like the one that hit Texas, it's not a Republican or Democrat who's hurting, it's our fellow Americans who are hurting. And it's our job to help everyone in need.
The state's Republican leaders have come under fire for not heeding warnings that its power grid needed significant upgrades to defend against deep freezes, like the one in mid-February. While Biden did not get into laying blame Friday, his deputy national security advisor did fault the Texas government for foregoing energy regulation that could have left it better prepared.
Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine is one step closer to distribution. A panel of expert advisors gave the thumbs up to J&J's COVID-19 vaccine on Friday. That recommendation then goes to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which is likely to grant authorization for its emergency use within a day or so, setting the stage for a planned rollout of 3 to 4 million doses next week. That would make J&J's vaccine the third one available in the U.S. after those made by Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, and it would be the only one that requires just one shot. Unlike the other two, J&J's vaccine can be stored in normal refrigerator temperatures instead of ultra-cold storage. That makes distribution a lot easier. A trial found that J&J's vaccine was 66% effective at preventing moderate to severe cases of COVID-19, and it was 100% effective at preventing hospitalizations 28 days after vaccination.
Gunmen have seized more than 300 schoolgirls in a nighttime raid in northwestern Nigeria, according to police. There's been no immediate claim of responsibility for what is the second such kidnapping in a little over a week, in a region increasingly targeted by militants and criminal gangs. The assailants struck at around 1 a.m. on Friday, according to the Information Commissioner in Zamfara State, firing sporadically as they entered the government girls' science secondary school in the town of Jangabi. The police and the army have launched search and rescue operations for the 317 missing students. Zamfara's police commissioner, Abutu Yaro.
We're on the trail of the kidnappers. That's why you find us in the fringes of the forest here. It's part of our locational efforts, and it's part of our cordoning efforts. Okay. In order to retrace the kidnappers and retrieve the students.
School kidnappings were first carried out in Nigeria by jihadist groups Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa province. But the tactic has since been adopted by others in the northwest whose agendas are unclear. Abductions are now endemic around the increasingly lawless north, and Friday was the third such incident since December, when 344 boys were taken from a school in Zamfara's neighbouring Katsina state. Last week, unidentified gunmen kidnapped 42 people, including 27 students, in an overnight attack on a boarding school. Officials speaking on a condition of anonymity say the rise in abductions is fueled in part by sizable government payoffs in exchange for child hostages, though the government denies making such ransom payouts. Earlier this month, President Muhammadu Buhari replaced his long-standing military chiefs amid the worsening violence.
The United States will act to protect American and coalition personnel and our security interests in the region.
Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said on Friday that the U.S. airstrike carried out in Syria totally destroyed 9 facilities used by Iranian-backed militias in the country in Joe Biden's first known military action as president.
When we referred to the justification for the strikes, we talked about recent attacks. So I'd leave it at that.
Western officials and some Iraqi officials accuse Iranian-backed groups of involvement in deadly rocket attacks on U.S. sites and personnel in Iraq over the last month. Kirby said Iraq was able to help the U.S. determine who was responsible for the recent attacks in Iraq, but that Baghdad did not assist in the targeting process in Syria.
I can tell you that the president himself authorized this yesterday morning.
Syria said the airstrikes were a cowardly act and urged Biden not to follow, quote, the law of the jungle. An Iraqi militia official close to Iran said the strikes killed 1 fighter and wounded 4. U.S. officials said the strikes were limited in scope to show Biden's administration will act firmly while trying to avoid a big regional escalation. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers from both political parties welcomed the strikes, but a number of Democrats questioned the legal justification under which they were carried out and the continuation of military operations in the Middle East.
Deep underground in Poland's UNESCO World Heritage Waliszka salt mine, aerobics music and the likes of YMCA is pulsing as the class swings kettlebells and squats. This is not your usual scene in the popular tourist site, known for its ornate underground chapels carved from salt. But during the pandemic, it's been turned into a therapeutic centre, helping people recover from COVID-19. The pensioner Christina Gorniak from Krakow, she says the exercises are helping her, as she is still suffering from post-COVID-19 symptoms.
The typical breathing exercises like blowing the feather, using a straw to suck the cotton ball, help us breathe in a different way, but also stretching the chest or exercises that help increase the lungs' capacity.
Doctors say the microclimate in the mine, which stretches as far as 327 meters underground, also helps people with pulmonary problems. Magdalena Krostsen, a doctor working at the mine, explains that the air reaches the underground rooms through a series of salt corridors, and thanks to this, it's cleaned of pollutants that are on the surface.
Additionally, air ionization and favorable thermal and humid conditions foster the recovery of the respiratory system.
A salt mine with a healing tradition that reaches back to the 19th century and now used again in the present.
The Nasdaq index rallied in choppy trading on Friday as big tech names such as Apple and Amazon rebounded following a big sell-off in the previous session amid surging bond yields. The S&P 500 ended little changed while the Dow closed lower after dropping earlier in the session to a 3-week low. The benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury yield eased to roughly 1.4% after jumping to about 1.6% on Thursday. Still, the sudden rise in yields has tempered investors' appetite for technology stocks. But Kevin Nicholson, co-chief investment officer at Riverfront Investment Group, says tech is still king.
Today is a reversal for technology because it was beaten up so badly yesterday. I still believe that technology is going to be one of the leaders going forward, even though we are getting that cyclical rotation where you're starting to see more people focus on industrials and materials. And that's largely driven because of the potential of a stimulus package that's going to focus on infrastructure. But I do think that you're going to see equity markets be more volatile over the coming weeks just because we've gotten such a dramatic move up in yields at such a rapid pace.
An early surge in the shares of GameStop fizzled and left the video game retailer's stock down 6.4% on Friday, throwing water on a renewed rally this week that has left analysts puzzled. Meanwhile, on the economic front, the latest data showed U.S. consumer spending increased by the most in 7 months in January after household incomes got a boost from the latest round of stimulus checks.
So far, these have been the latest news for today. Goodbye. Take care.